Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Now, last week we had part one of a program that we dealt with the legal aspects facing entrepreneurs, and tonight we continue with that topic. And once again, I take the opportunity of welcoming my very special guest, Mohamed.
Assalamu alaikum. To all the viewers of ITV as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And thank you for joining us once again, Mohamed.
It's a pleasure.
Last week we didn't have time to complete a very interesting part of our discussion. The viewers will recall that we had covered quite a number of aspects of legal challenges or legal aspects that an entrepreneur will have to deal with. And part two will basically deal with a number of different topics, including the National Credit Act, National Consumer Protection Act, patents, copyrights a little bit later on in the show. But we start tonight with legal contracts. And I just want to make the following point. Due to technical difficulties last week, we were unable to open the lines early. But you, the budding entrepreneur, have an opportunity of joining Mohamed and asking him questions, even on a practical level, regarding your businesses and the challenges that you would face. And a reminder for you is that our number is 011 086 7777. I repeat, 011 086 7777. Mohamed, with regard to contracts that an entrepreneur should be aware of, what advice can you give our viewers?
Okay, so firstly, I think an entrepreneur has to understand that you're going to get involved in contracts by the fact that if you buy goods or you are looking for certain kind of stock or services, and you're going to have to enter into a contract with the supplier, for example.
Right.
And there's certain aspects that need to be warranted and must be taken care of. Initially, any contract must be between two people, and that's very important. And then aspects in terms of a contract that are very important for both the entrepreneur and the person that he or she will be contracting with to understand are the following. There must be consensus, very, very important. And that means conscious agreements on terms and conditions that have been accepted by both parties initially.
So just to make that simple, what does consensus mean? That you must...
Agreement.
Yeah, you must have a meeting, what they say, meeting of the minds.
So absolutely.
You mustn't be buying an apple, but you're thinking of it as a pear.
Absolutely.
So just be sure about what you're agreeing upon.
Yeah.
Do those contracts have to be in writing?
Yes, I would suggest that because, you know, on hearsay things can become very obscure. So to benefit yourself in from a legal point of view, rather have it in writing so that both parties can agree on the terms and conditions upfront already.
So the written document doesn't lie, basically.
No, it doesn't. Okay. Secondly, contractual capacity. Now, I think that's very important to understand because, for example, a minor cannot enter into a contract.
Right. A minor, now we're referring to a person under the age of 18.
Yes.
Yes.
100%. A person that may have a mental disability.
Right.
Okay. A person that's incapacitated to enter into a contract. So those are very important kind of considerations to take into account.
Previously married females in community of property lacked the jurisdiction or capacity to contract without the husband's consent. That's no longer the case.
Absolutely. So, you know, things have changed, and that's what you also need to understand. Physical possibility in terms and in other words, the terms and the conditions must be realistic.
Right.
Okay, so you must know exactly upfront exactly what you're getting yourself involved in. Both parties must have the consensus or that agreement we spoke about, or the meeting of the minds. Then legality.
Yeah.
It must be legally possible.
Yeah, so for example, they can't sell you an Eiffel Tower.
Absolutely.
And then you say it's a binding contract.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then formalities, there are certain formalities that are prescribed for the formation of the contract, and that one of the most important things that I would stress there for budding entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs is make sure it's in writing. And if you need to, once again, we spoke about last week the fact that have a mentor, have somebody that's a lawyer that can brief you on legal aspects, and then you also further mentioned that try and get hold of an accountant, so that you cover those aspects that you may not understand fully. And there are people that can help you and assist you and guide you in what you need to do.
So I think in a way, what you're saying is outsource what is not your core business. Find an attorney, an accountant, a mentor outsource that, because your core competency might be creating pies, a very high quality pie. So you don't want to be the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker.
Initially, you may not have all this expertise, but I think by associating with these people, by speaking to them, by putting ideas to them, you start the process of learning for yourself.
Right.
And as you get more into the process of becoming an entrepreneur and really becoming accomplished in that process, you learn a lot of things along the way. And that's that learning process is going to be able to take you forward. So in time to come, you may become a mentor to somebody else that would like to become an entrepreneur. And that's a way of also giving back.
Right. So in brief, contracts must be in writing, should be clear, easy to understand, must be very, very clear about what the objectives are, and find the necessary help to assist you. You don't always have to find an attorney. It might prove to be expensive.
Absolutely.
But there are other resources. There's enterprise development agencies that have in-house expertise. There's incubation hubs.
You can ask around.
There's a DTI.
There are a lot of people that can provide you information. And I think just to take that a little bit further, Ashraf, is to also understand the concept of what defective contracts are.
Right.
And why I'm mentioning this also, because then in so much that you enter into a contract with a person and you want it to be legally binding on both parties and both parties must be treated fairly, you also have to understand when contracts become defective. For example, a void contract. If one of the requirements is absent or no contract is concluded. So you can't be coerced or forced into a contract with somebody, for example. That becomes a void contract. A voidable contract, something that's concluded can be set aside due to a defect that existed at the time. So maybe there was a kind of misrepresentation from one party to a certain extent. And you were going to buy, let's say you're going to buy a fridge that was necessary for your business, but you weren't told the fridge was defective.
Yes.
So then you have what is called a voidable contract because you were not given the truth in the entire process of the contract. And then an unenforceable contract that has been concluded but creates a natural obligation recognized but not enforced by law. Now, I think maybe you'll be able to give the listeners maybe a bit of an example of an unenforceable contract in terms of that. I'm not too sure what kind of example to use.
Well, I mean, unenforceable contracts, a good example is buying stolen goods.
Right.
That you can't enforce that.
Absolutely.
Because both parties are acting in bad faith.
Okay.
Both parties know it's stolen goods. So you can't, there's a famous case, I think it's Judgeby versus Cassim. It goes back many, many years, in 1930s. There was a sale of a box of stolen condensed milk. And when the buyer, I don't know which one it was, but when the buyer opened it, it contained bricks.
Okay.
He tried to enforce that contract, saying, I bought stolen condensed milk. And obviously the court said, you can't buy stolen goods and then try and enforce an illegal contract.
Absolutely.
So it's an unenforceable contract.
Okay, 100%. I think it was clearly explained. So I think it's also important that as much as you enter into contracts, you must know when contracts can be negated, especially on the part of the entrepreneur. It's very, very important.
Right.
Because you could be getting yourself in a whole legal mess and you really don't need it, especially when you're just starting up initially.
Just as a side, Mohamed, isn't it very scary for the entrepreneur to be entering into the zones and juggling and finding, oh, but I've got so many things to look after. All I want to do is bake pies and sell pies. Why do I have to worry about, say, for example, the National Credit Act or the National Consumer Protection Act? Let's try and help them with some information.
Well, basically, it's important. I think you mentioned last week's show that it's a landmine. It's a minefield that the person has to basically encounter. But it's a learning process, and it can become a very valuable learning process for you. As you go along, you're acquiring more and more information. You're starting to make decisions that basically will benefit your running of your organization or your business in a much better way. So, for example, two acts that came out very recently in the last couple of years. The one is the National Credit Act.
Right.
And for example, if you supply goods or services under a discount transaction or a credit agreement, okay, or you advance money on credit under pawn transaction, for example, and anybody that has a credit facility or any person who acquires the right of a credit provider under credit agreement must be registered with as a credit provider. That is why you will see that if you go to a bank or you go to you're buying a car from a dealership, they will tell you they're an accredited financial services provider.
Right.
And it's important that you have to do that. Now, if your business is going to be conducted to the point where, let's say you're going to allow people to buy on credit from you and you've got at least about 100 credit agreements, then you have to be registered. It's very, very important.
That's critical, actually.
right? So
and I think most people overlook that.
Absolutely. So
in fact, that contract can be set aside on that alone, that you fail to register as a national credit provider.
It's very important. And
so I think it's worth repeating.
Absolutely.
If you have 100 or more.
If you register as a credit provider, if you as a credit provider have at least 100 credit agreements.
Right.
And that is the sort of starting
benchmark,
point for anyone, at least the benchmark that people need to basically do. Then to continue, credit providers may not entice prospective debtors in any way. So you can't force people to come and buy from your shop.
Yeah.
And the Act provides strict regulations regarding the way in which credit providers may provide credit. Now, there's a very practical example, and I've seen this in the newspaper, with the consumer column sometimes.
Right.
Sometimes you basically go into a shop that has very narrow aisles and they're selling very expensive things.
Yes.
And your bag as a woman may accidentally knock down an item, or even for a man does it.
Yeah.
You can't be held responsible because you did not go with the intent into the shop to break items.
Yeah. Although they put up a big sign.
And that sign basically now is, they've been instructed to take it down because it becomes invalid, because nobody came into the shop with the intention to break the goods.
Sure.
So if your aisles are narrow and people are trying to force their way through to look at your goods on display and inadvertently or accidentally knock it off, then you can't basically keep it. And there was a case where the person was kept behind and the policeman had to be called in. And then it had to, she had to pay for it. And then when she took the matter up, the company had to basically refund her that money.
Yeah, and just on the side note there, you don't necessarily have to experience very high legal costs. You can go to a small claims court.
Absolutely. Anything under 3,000?
15,000.
Or is it now up to 15,000? Well,
so
okay.
Now what you say is, I was forced to pay this, I was paid under duress, this is what the law states, and I want my money back.
Absolutely. And then the last thing also is the Act provides consumers with a range of rights should they be unable to repay their debts.
Okay.
Now, previously this was not there.
Yes.
And then people started getting lawyers' letters and being forced to go into garnishing, or we're having all those kind of things happening right now.
I mean, just a point aside, some topic that we're going to be covering in the future, very, very important judgment of Flemix in the Western Cape High Court, not a topic for tonight, extremely important, about emolument attachments orders. This is the case that dealt with the farm workers in the Cape.
Absolutely.
That had almost 2/3 of their pay docked by emoluments attachment orders due to loans that they had taken from loan sharks, and not just loan sharks, sorry, from the industry that loans money at very high interest rates. And but like I say, that is a topic we'll hold over for another time. But and just to come back to our
so the
compliance
Act also says if you become a credit provider and you put an application in, the National Credit Regulator will look at three aspects very importantly. They will look at your BEE compliance.
Right.
Okay, your broad-based black economic empowerment within the Act. They will look at your compliance in terms of the Act, number one. Number two, the commitment made by the applicant in combating over-indebtedness.
Okay.
So that you can't basically over-indebt people and cause a problem for them, ultimately. And the last one is that you must be registered with SARS. So all those aspects that we spoke about last week, about with VAT, with pay, so you must basically make sure that from a legal point of view, you cover all your aspects with SARS. The National Credit Regulator will look at those aspects first before they can grant you an application or say that you become a registered credit provider. So I think that's very important for entrepreneurs to take into account as well.
Perhaps at that point it will be convenient just to take a short break. Please stay tuned and join us after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. And tonight you're reminded that we're dealing with the topic of legal aspects facing an entrepreneur that you should be aware of when you are in your own business. And once again, we are joined by Mohamed Kara, who's helping us to better understand this. Mohamed, we just before the break we were talking about the National Credit Act and the compliance that we touched with last week. And so you're saying that in order to be registered as a credit provider, you have to go through all of these.
That have to be adhered to. But then I think it goes one step further.
Yes.
For an entrepreneur, as much as you are now registered with the National Credit Act, you need to understand the Consumer Protection Act.
Right. Let's talk about Consumer Protection Act.
And firstly, you need to have a look at who is regarded as a consumer in terms of the Act. So it's a natural person, including small businesses and franchisees, any juristic person whose asset value or annual turnover is less than 2 million.
Now, it's very important to just dwell on that point a bit. What is a natural person? You see, people think that only human beings.
100%.
But in law, a company is a person.
Absolutely. They refer to it as an entity.
As an entity, yes.
Okay, so a company can be regarded as a legal person.
And they must, the ceiling of their turnover is 2 million.
Absolutely, and that's again the benchmark.
Okay.
And applies to sale of goods and provision of services.
Right.
That's the Consumer Protection Act. Now, in terms of that, what is important for an entrepreneur to understand that customers have the right to cancel any pre-bookings without being penalized.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're going to a show and you've made bookings, you have the right to basically cancel it without being penalized. Now, before it wasn't done.
Yes.
Because it was on scales. And if you didn't basically cancel before the time, then you were charged part of it. But now that has been totally revoked.
Right.
So if you don't want to go to a show and for some reason there's personal problems, whatever the case may be, your full amount has to be refunded.
Okay.
Okay. Fixed term agreements cannot be automatically renewed. Now, a very good example of this, and entrepreneurs need to take into account, for example, if you've got a cell phone contract, the cell phone contract runs for 2 years, 24 months. It is the responsibility of the service provider to inform you that your contract is coming to an end.
Right.
Now, I had to go and do some research on this because what I found is that, for example, these service providers, and without mentioning anybody's names, they will continue to basically debit your account every month until you tell them to stop. But now that has changed. So they have the right to inform you that you know your contract's coming to an end. Do we need to terminate it or whatever? So you must be careful of that as well, because then it's unnecessary money going off your bank account.
Right.
And you can't afford to just basically have money going out for no reason. Customers can cancel a fixed term agreement at any time with 20 days notice.
Right.
So again, what was not apparent before, now basically what they've done with the Consumer Protection is to give the rights to consumers in deciding if they buy something. An entrepreneur has to be aware of these kind of things.
Right.
So whatever business you're going into, remember that the Consumer Protection Act does apply to you in totality. So there's no getting away from that as well. Okay. So you need to be familiar with those things.
And the entrepreneur himself, there's no ceiling figure of 2 million for him. It's at the behest of the consumer.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And then furthermore, businesses must give a quote before work is done.
Okay.
Now, a lot of this is not being done, and as an entrepreneur, if you're going to start off the right way, then do it right the first time. Very important.
Just must that quote be in writing? Surely, I
yes,
mean,
it must be in writing. Yes, because you can't just have a verbal quote again, then it becomes hearsay.
Yeah,
and it causes unnecessary problems. A consumer may return unsafe or defective goods within 6 months of purchase.
Very, very important.
Okay, and you cannot refuse to take that goods back.
Let's just take somebody in the job of repairing cell phones. 6 months.
Yeah.
He can bring it back and he can say, I'm not happy. Full refund.
Now, there's two aspects here. As an entrepreneur, you need to understand the Act, but we also need to basically encourage our viewers on ITV, go and read the Consumer Protection Act so that you know your rights.
Right.
It's very important so that you can actually stand up for your rights in the case of buying something or buying an item or whatever. You know exactly what you're getting yourself into. I think it's very important. Then there's a mandatory 3-month warranty on installed repaired work. So, for example, if you put in a satellite dish or whatever the case may be, there's mandatory 3 months warranty. Okay, and that means that the person that is installed has to basically come back within those 3 months period to fix up whatever has not been done.
Irrespective of what he says on his quotation, by law, the consumer is afforded 3-month protection.
No obligation to pay for unrequested goods.
Okay.
Now, a very interesting, sometimes I know as young people you can play a joke on somebody. What happens in the case where you say you phone Pizza Hut to somebody like that and you order 10 pizzas and you send it to somebody's house?
Okay.
Now, under that circumstances, that person doesn't have to basically pay because it was not requested by this person.
But conversely, he can't eat up the pizzas.
Absolutely, and then not claim also. So
because then that's a ratified contract.
100%.
Just a reminder to our viewers, the lines are open. Mohamed is ready to take your calls and assist you with any questions. 011-086-7777, 011-086-7777. 877. Any questions you may have regarding entrepreneurs and the law. But you're not limited to that. Mohamed has got vast personal experience and he teaches in the area of entrepreneurial law. And if you have questions regarding your business, how you should strategize, I mean, it falls outside the ambit of legal discussions, but I'll give you the opportunity of asking questions about your business, branding, strategizing, taking the product to market.
Okay, just a few more that we can mention if we've got the time to.
Yes, we do.
Customers have 5 days to rescind direct marketing offers. Now, sometimes you get calls from people that say, you know, you want to buy something and inadvertently it sounds good to you on the phone and you decide to buy the item. You've got 5 days in which to basically rescind it.
Yeah, lots of times you get calls for people offering you new cell phone contracts. Absolutely. And that's unsolicited. Yeah. And should that become a nuisance in terms of Consumer Protection Act, you can put your name onto a list of people and says, I do not want to be contacted by direct marketers. And then your name is circulated and the direct marketer better not call you.
Absolutely. And even in terms of timing, when they're allowed to phone you.
Yes.
There's certain times they're not allowed to phone you as well.
Right.
Goods may not be promoted in a deceptive, misleading or fraudulent manner.
Right.
So you can't misrepresent something and say it does, you know, an appliance works in a certain way when it doesn't.
Right.
Okay, so that also. All agreements must be in plain language.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's very important because the consumer may not have or understand legal jargon.
Right.
But that's the more reason why any agreements that you go into, plain language so that both parties understand exactly what their rights and responsibilities are in terms of the contract.
Okay.
And then franchise agreement aspects, very important again. Okay. And I think that covers just the basic issues around what an entrepreneur must be aware of.
Right.
Because sometimes as an entrepreneur, you could become a franchise operator.
Right.
So you buy into a franchise operation. You also need to understand what the franchise agreements have to be concluded and how they have to be done.
Yeah, that can be quite tricky.
Absolutely.
Because it's a detailed document. There, I would recommend that you get some kind of really good help to 100%. Make you understand this.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's as far as the Consumer Protection Act goes now.
And then we come on to the more sort of salient features, and I just want to digress a little bit here because now we start going into the HR component.
Okay.
So let's say as an entrepreneur, you have the opportunity to hire people to work for you.
Right.
Then you face another legal ambit or laws that you have to basically make sure that you are familiar with. Now,
and South Africans who know very well.
Just at the onset, I think it's important for us to understand this, and we make light of it, but it's significant. I read an article recently where Herman Mashaba, and he's been an entrepreneur in South Africa for a very long time.
Very successful as well.
Very successful as well. He took a very simple need and he basically, he's only till now, he's still got just 4 people working for him or employed by
That's amazing.
Right till now. And he says he considers himself a capitalist, but one of the things that he said is that we've got draconian labor legislation in this country.
Right.
And maybe those are strong words, but we need to understand it. And just to make it simpler for a person that's going into entrepreneurship, if you're going to basically employ somebody, it's very easy to hire South African, but very difficult to fire South African.
Right.
Because of the legal aspects and the labor relations that you have to basically engage with. And I think that's very, very important.
Well, I think a lot of people have now taken the view in terms of recent legislation that upheld the rights of labor brokers. So a lot of people go destroy the employer-employee relationship. Absolutely. And enter into a relationship with the broker. Yeah. And then your contract is with the broker, not the employee directly.
100%.
But on that point also, temporary employees, after a period of 3 months, are now regarded as permanent. You must be very careful.
Think, that period can be between 3 and 6 months, but now then they have to become permanent. So that's going to change.
No, they're deemed.
They're deemed to be permanent.
The amendments are saying.
Absolutely, they have been enforced. So it's all those kind of things that you need to become aware of, and any new amendments that come in with the Labour Relations Act will automatically impact on your business, whether you like it or not.
Right.
So when we look at the legal aspects that the person has to adhere to from a personnel perspective, then you're looking at the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act, or COIDA.
Very,
so we can
very
discuss
important.
Those in each one. The Unemployment Insurance Fund and the manner in which you have to register for that.
Yes.
If you're going into an industry where there's union activity, then you need to go and see whether there's bargaining councils. If there are bargaining councils, you need to register with the bargaining councils then.
Okay, just make our viewers understand, what is a bargaining council?
What happens is in certain industries you have...
Like the metal workers.
Okay, let's take the motor industry.
Right.
So you've got the motor manufacturers like your Volkswagen and Golf and Mercedes-Benz and so forth. So they've got employee organizations.
Right.
Then you've got the trade unions that are representing the workers that are working in those industries.
Right.
Okay. So now what happens is they created a bargaining council where the industry representatives and the union representatives on behalf of the workers come together and they negotiate agreements for the mutual benefit of both the parties.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's a bit of an ongoing joke with regard to this whole thing, is that in South Africa we have 5 seasons, Ashraf.
Yes.
And we normally talk about winter, summer, spring and autumn, and then we have the strike season.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, it's a bit of on a light note, but during this time you can see there's been a lot of labor, a lot of strike activity going on in different organizations and so forth. And if you are now taking into account working with the bargaining councils, then you need to know the Labour Relations Act very, very, very
I think very, very important. If there's a dispute and you belong to a bargaining council, you cannot take that to the CCMA.
Absolutely.
You are confined to the bargaining council.
Yes.
And they also have powers of adjudication and mediation.
100%. And that becomes a whole other legal landscape that you have to basically encounter by really understanding the Labour Relations Act very, very well. Then you need to understand what the Labour Relations Act is all about and what does the Act actually cover, the purpose of the Act. And then, very, very importantly for entrepreneurs is the BCEA, or the Basic Condition of Employment Act.
Yes.
Because that will stipulate certain things that are enforceable. No matter what happens, you have to adhere to those aspects in terms of fair labour legislation or fair working conditions, etc. And then the Wage Act, because in certain industries, in certain service providers or any kind of businesses that have started up, wage agreements may be still in effect.
Yes.
And ultimately then we need to look at broad-based black economic empowerment, because when you become a...
the so-called triple B, triple E.
Yes.
Yes.
In the case of just starting up with entrepreneurship, and as we mentioned previously, when you're looking at some of the other aspects of the legal aspects with regard to the national credit provider, they're going to see your compliance in terms of BEE. And that is a minefield on its own for a recently startup business.
Yes.
Because there's codes that you have to adhere to, then there's points that you have to accumulate. And based on the points that you get and whether you're confining to all the codes, you get from level 1 to level 7.
Yes.
And within that, then you are given certain amount of points to give you the amount of compliance that you have. Now, this has a significant impact in terms of how you're going to actually run your business, because if you're not BE compliant, most of the time you're left way in the back.
No, in fact, I think, to be clear, you always requested to provide your BEE certificate. So.
Yes.
And without that, well, you're actually starting off on a very bad footing.
100%.
You won't become a service provider to, say, governments or local departments or local agencies. You won't be able to tender properly.
Absolutely. And BEE works very much with preferential procurement.
Yes.
Where the government is trying to basically allow small businesses to get into the major economy.
Right.
So that you don't only have this kind of monopoly with big businesses doing everything. Smaller businesses are given just as much rights to get involved in economic activity as well. So, and then, all that has to basically be understood in totality for your business. So you've got a lot of groundwork to lay before you actually start off.
Again, a very good point to take a short break. Please join us after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Tonight we are joined again by Mohamed Kara, who was our guest last week as well. And Mohamed is helping us understand the legal aspects of entrepreneurship. So what are the challenges, legal challenges, that an entrepreneur is expected to be facing? Once again, you're invited to call in, and the number is 011-086-7777. Mohamed, just before the break, we just touched on COIDA. What does COIDA stand for?
Well, COIDA is, the rightful name is the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Disease Act. It used to be known as the Workmen Compensation Act before.
Right.
Right? And what happens here is that it provides a system of no-fault compensation for employees who are injured in the course of their employment. Now, let me explain that in very simple terms. For example,
Right.
if you work on a construction site,
Yes.
there's safety equipment that you must have. You must have a hard hat and you must have boots.
And the boots has to be.
Okay, with metal tips or
Yes.
something to that
No,
extent.
it must have a toe cover.
Toe cover with a metal tip. Now, that is important. Then you have, for example, and I know this is not being done, but it's important to highlight this. So even if you have workers in your shop,
Yeah.
you have to have universal precautions. In the event of somebody getting injured in your shop and this
Yeah.
person starts bleeding, you need to have gloves,
Yes.
right? And we may take it as lightly, but it's very, very important to think about those things.
In fact, there's legislation coming now that you're going to have safety plans.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have safety officers trained. People must know first aid. People must know how
100%.
to operate a fire extinguisher. All of that is coming.
Yes.
Yes.
Now, compensated irrespective injuries were a result of own negligence or that of the employee or other person.
Mm-hmm.
So, in other words, if you are injured at work, then you have some kind of compensation that you can get, and this is
Right.
where COIDA comes into play. Employees may not institute a claim for damages against an employer or any other person.
Okay, that's important.
It's very important.
Because your employee mustn't think, okay, now I slipped and fell in the aisle, I'm suing my employer. No.
No, you can't do that.
Your employer takes, well, not your employer takes, your employer pays every month
Absolutely.
to a particular fund.
And because of that, he is protected or she is protected in terms of
No,
that.
and you have a statutory right against that fund,
Yes.
and not the employer.
Not the employee in personal capacity.
And so in law we say you have to excuse that right. That means you have to extinguish that right first
Okay.
before you look to the employer.
And
again.
then, very important for entrepreneurs to understand as well,
Yeah.
that there are three categories of disablement.
Okay.
The one is temporary disablement.
Right?
Then you can have permanent disablement.
Yes.
And then death of an employee, which then what will happen is any benefits that are accrued to that particular employee will then be paid to the beneficiaries or
Mohamed,
the family.
we have to take a break because there's a caller. Caller, please go ahead. Hello, can you hear us? Okay, we can't hear you. I think we have a technical problem. We'll come back to you, caller. Okay, Mohamed.
So those three are very, very important for us
I
to
think the
understand.
last one you spoke very importantly
Yes.
about death.
If the person loses their life in the course of working, then what happens is still to the family gets the benefits that the
Yes.
person would have got.
Yeah.
And that's important to understand. So, and there's been cases where, for example, there's people that work in very dangerous employment.
No, every
like-
week there's a building collapse.
Yeah, there's a building collapse, or they're working for, let's say, the security guards that
Yes.
are working for collecting money.
Yeah.
And a person gets
Killed
shot or
in-
killed in
yeah.
the line of duty.
Mm.
Then, through the Compensation Act, the family
Yeah.
can be basically given some kind of restitution
Okay.
or benefit can be accrued to the family in the event of that happening.
All right. Very important. So the family is not left destitute.
No, absolutely not.
Okay. So I think the whole point is you must comply, because if you don't, you're going to face a civil suit yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then the next important aspect that I would like to touch on is the Unemployment Insurance Fund.
Right. UIF.
Now, what happens here is the Unemployment Insurance Fund is there again for the benefit where, let's say for example, we know we're going through recessionary times
Right.
and companies having to lay off workers. So
Yeah.
every month, the company basically doesn't take off from your salary but contributes to the unemployment insurance fund.
Right.
In the event of you losing your job,
Yeah.
you have some kind of recompensation again for a brief period of time. Now, I don't know if there has changed
6
between
months.
3 and 6 months. So
No,
it's
it's
still
6
on 6
months
months now.
maximum. But you are obliged to try and offset your losses. You must show that you tried to take up employment,
100%.
etc. Yeah.
Okay, so what is it that an entrepreneur has to comply with? Firstly, you must complete and submit a UIF form,
Okay.
and it's available from the Department of Labour, DOL, and it covers employees presently earning up to 76,800 Rand per annum.
That's very important to
Okay, so
make
that
a
figure
note.
is, take note of that figure, 76,752, but let's make it round it off to 76,800 Rand per annum.
Mohamed, let's just pause. I think the caller is back with us. Can you hear us? Walaikum salam.
Yes. Walaikum salam.
Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. My question is for Mohamed.
Yes.
It's Shiham Abram speaking.
Assalamu alaikum, Shyam.
Walaikum salam. I just want to find out from you, it's industry specific to the fashion industry. As a designer, I wanted to find out if I've legally protected my brand and trademark licensed it. how do I further protect it from being
Copied.
counterfeited and copied within South Africa as a country and then also overseas?
Okay, we have made provision to answer with regard to patents, and that's going to be coming up a bit later.
But deal with it now.
And can we deal with it
Yeah,
now?
we
if you
can
want?
deal with it now.
Okay, so let me just go through those aspects with you very briefly. The first thing that is important to note, and basically let me just get to my,
I think there's two parts to the question.
yeah,
One is how to protect it legally in this country and then internationally. I think the starting point is all copyright laws are national. Copyrights, designs, trademarks, they only enjoy national protection. For international protection, you need international registration. Very expensive, very complex process. So just keep focusing on trying to get national protection.
okay, so you get patents, you get designs, and you get copyrights. As far as a patent is concerned, my understanding is it's an exclusive right granted for invention, which is a product or process that provides a new way of doing things. And if you're in the fashion industry and you've come out with new or innovative designs, or you're using new kind of material to manufacture or design things, then that could be patented. Okay? Or you're offering a new technical solution to a problem in terms of when we spoke about design, the fact that you may be looking at new ways, or you've come up with design aspects that are totally different to what is currently being done, then that you have the right to patent that. So the design, for example, in the Designs Act of 1993 caters for registration. So you need to look at that aspect. Then patents provide protection for the owner for a limited period of 20 years. So you are covered for the period of 20 years.
I think we must be
After
clear.
which-
A patent is an invention.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Copyrights subsist from the time you put pen to paper.
Now, copyrights can basically, it's the protection of various outputs of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
Things like literally, artistic, musical
Sketches,
works,
a sketch is a fashion sketch,
Absolutely. I
yes.
think that you could also basically copyright, because nobody else then has the right to copy your designs
Reproduce it,
or
yeah.
reproduce your designs. Now, I think in the fashion industry, we've had a lot of that
Oh,
happening
yeah.
recently.
Yeah, I saw
And I
that
think
recently. Somebody
yes, there was imitations
accused
or
of,
knockoffs and things like
yes,
that.
yes.
So I think, Shyam, from that perspective, then copyrights will be very important in terms of all your sketches. Make sure that they are copyrighted so nobody else can
And
copy your
date them.
designs. Absolutely. From the period that you basically asked for the copyright, I think there's a period also that exists in terms of anybody else.
Okay, copyright is
is
basically
indefinite.
but date it so that you have proof of the date of your production.
Okay.
The production.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
So-
anything that you've sketched, I think, just make a date at the bottom, and then make sure when you ask for copyright protection that you know exactly from which date are you applying for. And that becomes indefinite, whereas a patent, like I said, lasts for a period of 20 years.
Okay, Shukran Jazakallah, that answers my question.
Okay.
You're
Shukran.
absolutely
Assalamu
welcome.
alaikum.
Thank you for calling.
Assalamu
Assalamu alaikum. So Mohammed, we were talking about, before we fast forwarded to that topic, I know we're coming back. Let's just go back to our previous discussion. So we were still talking about wages. Yeah,
Well, we're talking about the unemployment insurance fund.
yes, UIF.
And we mentioned that figure of 76,800
Yes.
per annum.
Mm.
Now, once the venture has been registered, and we spoke about the different forms of registration last week with the sole proprietor and a partnership and the Companies Act and all that, what happens, the UIF officers will send the following. They'll send a UIF 3 form, okay? That's the monthly return for the UIF premiums that have to be paid,
Yes.
okay? Then there's a UIF 5 form.
Yeah.
Any new employees that you are basically have come into your employ,
Right.
then you have to basically register them as new employees on the UIF 5 form. And then you have what is called the UI 19 information form, completed for every existing UIF member,
Right.
and that has to be submitted to the commissioner by the 7th day of each month.
Okay.
So
very important.
Very important. You have to stick with that date.
Yes.
Otherwise, there's penalties that you accrue again. So again, there's important dates that you need to take care of in terms of certain legal aspects when they have to be given in.
Right.
And again, for an entrepreneur, it's important that you stick to those deadlines.
I think just to come back to our starting of the conversation, when you can't do these things, outsource it to those that can, which is your accountant, not necessarily your attorney. In this case, I think most accountants are entrusted
Will
with
be able
that.
to cover you with these aspects as well.
Right.
Yes, and
but you
because
must
they're
check
familiar-
because
Yeah.
You can't just outsource it and then expect
No,
that it's done. Eh?
literally, you know, and that's a scary part of this whole aspect. Is at the end of the day, you
The
have
buck
to
stops
cover
with
yourself.
you.
Absolutely. And when you're starting off just new, everything is going to be the landscape is going to be very different when
Yes.
you've got experience in hindsight for about 3 to 5 years. Then things take a very different turn, where you're allowed to do more and you know more.
Yeah.
But when you're just starting off, it's important to make sure that you understand. And like I said, I'll always impose, do things right the first time. So
Good.
you don't have to come back and do it again.
Excellent, yes.
Okay.
So that was our UIF, and now insurance.
Yes, but if you'll allow me, there's
Yes.
certain other aspects I just want to cover
Yes.
as well very quickly. With the bargaining councils, we spoke about the fact that it must be in a union environment, and I think that's important. But for most entrepreneurs, they won't go into the union environment
Yes.
initially.
Yeah,
As sole traders, they'll start off very small, so they won't be limited to the extent of the Labour Relations Act, because the Labour Relations Act is what governs that. And this, the fact that you spoke about economic development, social justice, labour, peace, and democratization of the workplace,
Right.
that is encompassed in the Labour Relations Act. And the Bargaining Council ensures that both the employer and the employee are protected.
Right.
So if the employee decides to go on a strike,
Yeah.
the employer has the right to a lockout.
Okay.
So those kind of things are very, very important to think about. But for an entrepreneur starting out, you won't face all those hurdles initially. But as your company grows and as your business expands with time, you're going to have to basically familiarize yourself with the Labour Relations Act. However, what you cannot get away from is the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, because that is very, very important for an entrepreneur to understand. And with the Basic Condition of Employment Act, it's things like working hours.
Right.
That must be very, very stipulated. Now, the first thing, and this is something that companies, till today, we still ask people and they'll tell you, I don't have an employment contract.
Right.
It's important that you set an employment contract between you and your employee,
Right.
because that will basically dictate all the aspects of the conditions of employment for that person. In terms of the working hours,
Yeah. I think very important to pause and just mention this. The Basic Condition of Employment Act must be prominently displayed on your walls,
Absolutely.
in your HR, and even if you don't have a different department, must be displayed in your office, because in Department of Labour will do a spot
Yes.
inspection, you'll be in breach. I think perhaps again a convenient place to take a break. Please stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. We're in the last sector of tonight's show, and once again you are invited to call in, and the number is 011-086-7777. You're reminded that we are talking about the legal aspects that faces various entrepreneurs, and Mohamed is here helping us in this part 2 of the series to try and understand some of the legal hurdles and challenges that you have to comply with as an entrepreneur. Mohamed, we were just speaking about the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, and it had to be prominently displayed. What else do you want to?
well, there's certain important aspects that
Yes.
as an employer you need to know about. Firstly,
Okay.
I don't want to go into much detail, but
Right.
working hours. Now, what are we talking about working hours? The ordinary hours of work.
Right.
So, for example, it's legislated in South Africa that you must have a 45-hour work week.
Right.
You need to work that out. It's basically 9 hours for 5 days, or
Right.
8 hours on a 6-day week.
Right.
Right? Overtime.
Yes.
And how do you pay for overtime? Like
Right.
it's 1 1/5 for working on a Saturday and a half on a Sunday.
Right.
And then if in lieu of that you can give person time paid off,
Right.
if you don't want to pay them. Meal intervals, a person must have 60-minute break after 5 hours of work, for example.
Okay.
So these are kind of things that you need to know. There must be rest periods. If you've worked consecutively over a 12-hour period, there must be a rest period provided for the person working for you.
Right.
So all these things need to
I
be
think
taken
it's
into account.
important to re-emphasize that this is legislation. This is not the behest of the worker. This is something you have to
It's
comply with,
enforceable.
whether you like
It's
it or
enforceable.
not.
And you can be taken to task by labour inspectors for this if you are breaking the rules.
Yeah. Yeah. When he says it's tea time, it's tea time.
Yes. Then remuneration for overtime and work on Sundays, public holidays, night shift, exclusions and emergency work. All those have to be taken into account in your Basic Condition of Employment Act.
Right.
Then leave, the annual leave that you give to employees, the sick leave they're entitled to, maternity leave with regard to women. I know that in some countries they're looking at establishing 11 months maternity leave. I don't even know whether that will ever happen in South Africa. We'll wait and see. But family responsibility leave, and then any exclusions again. Now, the exclusion means that if there's any kind of agreement, sector agreement, then you have to basically adhere to that as well.
Okay.
Then remunerations, deductions, and notice of termination periods must be basically stipulated.
And all of that is in terms of the basic conditions.
Absolutely, they stated categorically. So you can't miss out on any.
And you can't, I think very important, you can't contract out of this.
No, you
can't say in your contract, I'm not going to comply with the BCEA.
Absolutely.
That's
You're going to
not
be
possible.
in big trouble.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. Then there's administrative obligations that you need to take through. Now, these are the kind of forms and information that you have to keep, because they can be asked for. Anytime a labor inspector walks onto your premises, he or she can ask for any of this. So information on remuneration. You need to keep records informing the employees of their rights, certificates of service, and again, any exclusions by way of sectoral determination. Then prohibition of employment of children in forced labor. Okay, anybody under the age of 15 cannot be working in any circumstances in South Africa because the law does not permit it, and it's very, very important.
But now, does that exclude the entrepreneur who's 14 and or 15 and less? You're working for yourself. I mean, I can understand you being employed.
Yes.
But can you work for yourself?
Well, there's been examples, and I mean, from last week's program, most of the children we heard were under the age. But
I think the cutoff age was 15.
Was 15
at the 702.
Yes. Yeah. So I think there must be, but I mean, obviously,
I think the youngest entrant was 8 or
Absolutely.
7. Yeah.
But I think that's to inculcate that something like that into the children.
I think there's a big difference about employment of a child.
Yeah.
And the child seeking to be self-employed.
And I think in those circumstances, if parents can see it's something good here, then they'll actually support the child in the endeavor to basically become an entrepreneur from a young age.
They will not employ the child.
No, absolutely not. And then variations in sectoral determinants. Now, again, that has to be seen in context in terms of the industry or sector that you get involved in.
Okay.
And then composition and functioning of employment conditions commission. Now, there again, it's you make sure that everything in the workplace is basically conformed to with respect to the BCEA.
Okay,
so the compliance, the legality aspects, everything that you're supposed to do from an employer position, you have to make sure that it's covered properly and comprehensively.
Right. Well, and I think that brings us to the last part, which is wages. There's a Wage Act, right?
Yes, there's a Wage Act. Now, the Wage Act comes into effect on the premise that some people in certain departments or industries or service providers are paying people on a wage on a weekly basis.
Right.
So again, you need to have very strict records about the payments and deductions that are made with regard to wage agreements.
Right.
And the wage agreements must again be very clearly clarified with the workers, with the employees, so they know exactly what their rights are in terms of the Wage Act. It's very comprehensive, but we don't have the time to go into the details of it. But basically,
what's the main points there?
The main points is that they must understand how their wages are basically calculated.
Okay.
They must know the rates.
Yes.
And they must know if any deductions are being taken off and what percentage of the deductions are being taken off. So, for example, a person that's also earning a wage has the right to have access to a UIF, for example.
Okay.
So they need to know that. They also need to know their rights, even though they're getting wages, which is on a weekly basis compared to salary, which is on a monthly basis.
Right.
So that distinction has to be made. We don't want to go into the more technical aspects because I think just to remember, make the distinction between when wages are paid, when salaries are paid.
Right.
And I think that's basically sums up for an entrepreneur what they need to understand at this point.
Right. Do you just want to sum up just on a few comments on, I don't think we sufficiently covered the copyright trademarks. We just touched on it because of the caller.
Yeah.
But do you want to just basically just gloss over that?
Well, basically, the important aspect here is, as I said,
no, before we do that, very important, insurance. Yeah. Insurance is an integral part of an entrepreneur's business.
Well, again, if I go through all the insurance that entrepreneurs to think about, I think people are going to consider and say again, well, maybe this is what I mustn't do.
Okay, but let's do it.
All the more reason to do it. But in terms of insurance, what do you need to think about? What do you need to cover yourself? For example, personal accident and life insurance, very important.
Yes.
Okay, for in your capacity as an employer, as an entrepreneur, fire and general property insurance.
Okay.
Okay.
Protection of your assets.
Burglary insurance.
Right.
Right. And then plate glass insurance.
Okay. Most people, I think, would overlook that. And
it's very important because, I mean, your frontage sometimes is glass. Yes. And those glasses don't come cheap because, you know, sometimes your frontage can be quite expensive.
Especially where you're a tenant.
Absolutely.
And you draw the obligation. That's why you have to look at those contracts carefully that we spoke about. And usually they say that the tenant is liable for damage to the property
100%.
on the inside, but the glass is both inside and outside. So please be very careful. If plate
And it
glass,
could be no
you
fault
must
of
make
yours
sure
that the glass breaks as well,
Yeah.
so that you need to think about. Then goods in transit. If you are transporting goods, let's say they landed in Durban, they have to be transported by road to your
especially
business.
high worth goods like cell phones.
Absolutely, and I mean, you know, we've seen the proliferation of trucks being hijacked and so forth.
Exactly,
We
yeah.
need to understand the consequences of that as well. Money in transit.
Yeah, well, cash
Important.
businesses like
Absolutely.
garages,
Yeah. I mean, transporting
shops.
of your daily cash intakes to the bank, that has to be basically insured as well. Vehicle insurance, if you run a
Right.
fleet of vehicles as well. Then public liability insurance.
Okay.
Okay. Furthermore, business interruption insurance. I mean, the fact that you could have marches at startup at any time. You may have to close your business in the event of a march and your business gets damaged. You need to be protected somehow. So again, something you may not think about, but there are means for you to protect yourself from
Okay.
that. Then product liability insurance.
Very, very important.
Okay, and we've had some interesting cases in this country.
Yes.
I mean, a woman talking on a Nokia phone and the phone explodes in the hand,
Yes.
or a Corsa light, the back window exploding. Now, all those kind of things are product liabilities.
Yes.
I mean, a woman that was driving and the airbag popped out while she was
and
driving.
I
so-
think Honda had a problem with one of his cars catching fire.
Absolutely. You know, so all those kind of things you need to think about. Then bad debt insurance.
Very, very important.
Okay, because the risk today of people not paying you for goods and services
Yeah.
is very high.
Yes.
And you need to protect yourself.
But the
against
cost of that insurance is quite high.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Right? Then fidelity insurance.
Fidelity, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, how would you basically, if you can just help me out here in terms of fidelity insurance with regard to a business, what would that basically?
No,
entail?
like an attorney's fidelity fund. The attorney contributes to that,
Yeah.
and in the event that he's given a poor service, he can be sued, and then the fidelity fund would pay, provided he's paid his dues and to them every month, and he belongs to that. So, in that case, let's say attorney's staff commits theft of trust funds,
Right.
or the attorney himself.
Yes. Okay.
Then the claimant can go and sue the fund or claim that fund money back from the fund
Okay.
and say, look, you know, I'm entitled to it. So that's where the fidelity funds protects the consumer, and in this
Okay.
case, the entrepreneur has to be very clear that he has all of these insurances.
Okay. And then lastly, it's the employee's liability insurance.
Again,
So
very
I think
important.
very, very important. And then the whole aspect of what we spoke about, you wanted to sort of round off with patents and designs and copyright.
Yeah, we basically have about a minute just to wrap up.
Yeah.
So let's
So
try and deal
basically,
with
it was just what we need to understand, like I say, and like you correctly pointed out, the patent is something that can be basically given a duration of 20 years.
Yeah, the
Okay.
first most important thing, it must be an innovation, something
Yeah.
new.
Yeah.
So if it's pre-existing,
Then it
Some-
can't be patented.
it's not patented. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're coming out with new technology or something that's going to be radically different from what is already existing and doesn't exist already,
Yes.
then you can patent that.
Yes.
Um,
It must have a novelty aspect. That's the test.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the whole aspect of copyright, again, I said literally work, manuscripts, music,
Copyright covers everything.
comprehensively. And furthermore, when an entrepreneur registers any new invention which involves an inventive step and that is capable of being used or applied in the trade or industry of agriculture,
Yes.
what we also need to make is a distinction of what is not regarded as inventions. And I
Yes.
just want to end off with that.
Yeah.
A discovery, a scientific theory or mathematical method is not an invention.
Yes.
Literally, dramatic, musical, or artistic, or any other aesthetic creation
Yes.
is not a invention.
Yes.
Then a scheme, a rule, or method for performing a mental act, playing a game, or doing business.
Yes.
That's not regarded as it doesn't fall under an invention. A
For
program
example,
a computer.
apps.
Yeah, the apps that we have on the phones.
It's not a patent.
No, you can't
Yeah.
patent
You
that.
can protect it in other words, but definitely
Absolutely,
not
it's
a patent.
not patented. And then, so a program for a computer and the presentation of information. The way you present information, you can't patent that.
Okay, so you might have some new way of presenting, let's say, program.
Yeah.
That's not patentable. Mohamed, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the
Jazakallah
show.
for the opportunity once again, Ashraf.
I must thank you very much for taking 2 Thursdays out to join us and
It's a
help us
pleasure.
understand a very, very complex part of the law. Jazakallah, thank you very
Shukran.
much. And
And to the
thank you
viewers
to
of
the
ITV as
viewers.
well.
Please join us again next time, same place for another episode of Legal Ease, the show that converts legal jargon into legal ease. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.